Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder of Streamlined Properties and the team leader of Streamlined Properties on Market, brokered by eXp Realty. Whether you are looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
This is episode 24 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Ryan Gibson of Spartan Investment Group. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you. I'm just going to read your bio and then we're going to get right into it. Ryan is the president, chief investment officer, and co-founder of Spartan Investment Group. He's organized over $200 million of private equity for their projects. And specific to what I know we're going to talk about on this podcast episode, Spartan Investment Group has become a prominent self-storage firm since entering the space in 2017. They own, this is at the time of this document, 54 self-storage properties across 11 states, 3.1 million square feet of self-storage under management. Are those numbers still correct, Ryan?
Closer to 4 million square feet now and closer to, I think, 65 stores technically. So,
yeah, that's
growing.
Amazing. Yeah, awesome. Well, let's drop all the way back. What was your first enter spot into real estate investing? How old were you and when did you get interested? And then we'll obviously get all the way to the self-storage.
Yeah, I was probably in my late 20s, and first entree was actually my first kind of hard flip, buying the asset, flipping it, was in 2014. But prior to that, I was subletting apartments to pilots to have housing around airports prior to their trips starting and sometimes at the end. Yeah, they call those crash pads. And that was kind of my first kind of entrepreneurial endeavor in real estate. I was not really buying the real estate, arranging apartment complexes to allow for pilots to have accommodations when it wasn't covered by the airline. And,
so were those through sites like Airbnb, or were they through specialized sites for pilots? Or
this is before Airbnb existed.
Yeah.
So this is Airbnb before Airbnb, but pilot crash pads, it's an industry term, have been around since the Pan American days. They've been around forever, but I had a couple in Philadelphia, a couple in DC, where I would just go to the apartment landlord and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. And there'll be multiple pilots staying here, but they're only staying here for a night. And they only want to be here to get some sleep, and then they're off to their trip the next day. And they commute in from all over the country to start in their domicile and then end in their domicile. And so they just need accommodations when they're there. Highly professional, quiet, the best tenants ever that are occupying the space. And you collect more income than you do have expenses on the apartment. So that was kind of my first foray into real estate. Took a super long break. That was in 2005.
On the crash pads, though, were you doing arbitrage on those? Were you renting it and then renting it out? So you presented it as arbitrage up front to the landlords? Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
They said, hey, as long as you're not violating the lease, which said something to the effect of you can't have any guests that stay in your apartment for more than 10 days in a row, which the pilots didn't want to be there. They just wanted to be there one night and be gone because they don't want to live in that apartment. They want to either be on their trip or go home. That never was an issue. And then they were my guests in my apartment per letter of the law. And I was the tenant. And then there was just arbitrage in rent and revenue. Yeah. Yeah.
Because Airbnb arbitrage has become a little bit popular now, but I also liken a lot of what you said to what happened during the pandemic with travel nurses as people figured out midterm rentals, because they're similar to pilots. Except they're going to be there a long time, but they're great guests because they're never home and they're always working and they're professional and they're making a lot of money. So paying up for a nice place is no problem.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of camaraderie there and all the pilots know the game. Right. Everybody kind of cleaned up after themselves and were quiet when they were coming in late and leaving early, et cetera. So it was easy tenants, so to speak. Yeah.
Interesting. I think it's so cool to find out how, like, what the first thing that interested you. And that's a cool one because it's not something that was popular at the time. So where did you go from there after you're doing these arbitrage on the pilot game?
Had a thing going on there. It was very transactional. It was obviously like one apartment would have as many as 20 guests, 4 apartments, 80 tenants, so to speak, and maybe clearing $1,500 to $2,000 per month per property, which wasn't a lot, but really made an impact as a 21-year-old. And I ultimately sold those businesses to another pilot, took the cash, and I just sat on it and eventually saved up and purchased my first primary residence right after the housing crash. And I'm not some kind of economic genius, but we were saving and you could hear all the news about the housing market crashing. And it was like, oh my gosh, we still need to save some more for my first down payment on a house. And it just so happened that we had enough money saved up in 2009 and bought our first primary residence. And that house turned into a massive appreciation.
Timing.
My first rental property, got to take a HELOC off the house, buy 3 rentals with it, really leveled up with that property. But where I am today, 30,000 units, almost 4 million a square feet, that really didn't come from bootstrapping. It was an effort to start a real estate platform, a real estate company that has multiple lines of business. But I met my business partner when he moved into the house 2 doors down from me in the first house that I bought. And he had a lot of the same mindsets that I did with saving and earning income and wanting to work for a good employment center and being very professional, things like that. And we decided to start Spartan, and that was our kind of out of our garage in Washington, D.C. So.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, you've run into your partners in the oddest of places, and sometimes it is that you just find the commonality that's going to work and work on it together.
Yep.
How long did it take you to get from garage to real office?
Let's see. So we started messing around with the company in 2000, like early 2014, really. And we were still working our full-time jobs. I was still working as an airline pilot. And Scott was working at the Veterans Affairs, VA. And I think Scott cut ties officially with his job in like 2017. And my schedule was pretty flexible to continue, but just doing it a very part-time, less than part-time really. But we got the office in late 2017, early 2018 in Golden, Colorado. And that's actually where our corporate offices are now. We have about 40 employees there. And then we also have a small office with about 10 people in Seattle. So I'm in Seattle today. That's where I'm sitting in our Seattle office. And so that's the office, I think, really helped grow our company in a lot of ways because we were all coming in together and working and collaborating. And I think I know that we're in this like post-pandemic, who's in the office anymore? And what do you mean I got to go to the office? And there's mixed results. And I would appreciate both sides of an argument about having an office or not having an office. But the way it's benefited us has been just these little micro instances where I'll say something or somebody will say something and it'll spark an idea that wouldn't have happened on a scheduled Zoom call or wouldn't have happened in my home office, without anybody around. So I think the office has contributed a lot to our success. It certainly unequivocally has provided a sense of culture at the company that is hard to beat.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. Obviously, we'll get to your growth. But so when you guys started, what were you targeting in terms of acquisition right when you got started? Because I know it changes a lot, but it's just the two of you. What are you thinking in the real estate portal? Like, what do you want to buy to start off with?
We started with the house right next door to us, literally.
Taking over the neighborhood.
Yeah, we did 4 flips on our block. And so we just started with, it was pretty neat. The house that was in between both Scott and I was abandoned and vacant, and it was in our nation's capital, it was in Capitol Hill. And we were like, why is this house just completely neglected in a great neighborhood of Washington, D.C.? And we started doing research on the title, tax liens, trying to look up the owner or the heirs of the property. And what we learned is that a lot of residents from the 60s and 70s passed away. They didn't set up estates or planning, and the city property values weren't very high. So they let the properties go and they got passed down. But then as the neighborhood started gentrifying, all of a sudden these properties have real value. And it was like a detective process to figure out who is really in control of selling this property. And we did that on multiple properties where we would find properties that were in tax foreclosure or just had crazy title problems. And we really enjoyed the hunt of helping somebody who really didn't know what they have get money and get paid, and then also even work with them to try to get some of their back taxes reduced.
Yeah.
And that's where our mission statement to improve lives through real estate really came from. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
No, yeah. It was like, we want to help our sellers. We want to go the additional mile. And then we welcomed passive investors to participate in our projects. And then they would get this kind of a better opportunity because these properties were distressed. And so we got a better margin without competition. And then we were fixing up a neighborhood. So we're like, this is a lot of fun. We're helping out basically everybody on all sides of the equation while running a company. And so that was where we started, was residential development and condo construction. So it was good.
Yeah, I love what you said. And it goes to what your core values are, which I think are so important. But one, you started off with clustering, which is one of my favorite strategies, to buy as many with friends or each other, like on the same block. Because inherently, when you flip one, you just raise the own value on your own house. And then you flip another and then you raise it's always this principle. I always make this example of the art collector, David McGraby, who owns so many Warhols, and someone will say, like, why did you pay so much for another Warhol at auction? Because I just increased the value of my entire collection by overpaying for something. And you can do that in that neighborhood. But also you're focused on win-wins. And that when I'm off market on a smaller scale, I think you can grow so much better when you're looking for a win-win. And you're saying, instead of trying to fleece the seller of every deal, like you said, how can I help you? You're going to get a little reduction. You're going to get a little bit of money. And I'm going to get money, but I'm going to do all the work. And I think that's like the kind of fair part of it. And even the way that we write our off-market acquisition letters, they always stress a win-win, fair, instead of, I have a lot of cash, let me buy your property, you're in distress.
Exactly. I love it. Yeah, that approach is exactly the approach that we take. And I think it made a lot of traction. And ultimately, we were getting houses at 50% ARV, all costs in. So that's all the real estate cost to sell it.
Yeah.
Holding costs.
So you have extra to take care of somebody a little more. Yeah. I think that's
and
great.
We would take them out to dinner afterwards and congratulate them. I mean, we would do a lot of really nice things. And people are like, how are you finding these amazing deals? We're doing things that people don't want to do, which is hold their hand, go to court with them. We would do some wild stuff to really help people through. So that's where Scott and I aligned. We really were aligned in how we help our sellers, and we're looking for this overall big picture growth. And later on, that kind of turned to, how can we create a corporate environment? How can we create a company that people really want to come work for and have purpose, mission, vision, values, and really help have just an awesome place to work and help the lives of our employees, both personally and professionally.
Yeah. Was there ever a point at your growth, because now you guys are so much bigger, where it's harder to maintain the core values? For me, as my team grows, I'm always focused on the core values, but when you bring on more and more, you almost have to really shed a few people to say, ooh, that one's not a right fit. Was that difficult as you grew, in the quickest part of your growth?
I got to hand it to my partner on that. He's been focused on it the whole time. And one thing that we do is, anybody who we hire, they get a cultural final sign off by both Scott and I still. So they'll go on a phone screen, a one-on-one, a panel interview, and then they come to Scott and I, and it's mostly just a fit interview. And I always ask, I probably shouldn't say this because it's always a surprise, but I always say, which value do you least identify with of our core values? Which kind of tells me two things. One, you shouldn't have got it to this point if you don't know what our values are.
Yeah.
And two, you need to have some humility, and you need to always be working to grow, which is one of our core values, is growth.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to have some self-awareness. I looked at all your core values. This one, I don't really, it's hard. I'm working on this, but that one's probably a weak spot for me. And the more specific someone can be, the more open they can be about things. It's okay, you're going to be successful here because we don't want to know it all in the organization. And I think that's really helpful when you think about hiring for values. You just focus on it. The other thing that we do is, every week on Wednesdays, we have a company-wide all-hands call. And the first thing that we do is we go around the room, and every single person in the company, dozens and dozens of people, give gratefuls to somebody else. I am really grateful for you taking the extra time this week. And then we review the mission, vision, values. and we say, how would we adhere to those things and give specific examples? And so for like example, last week I gave a growth for a specific employee who has really been stretching to do something at the company that they've never done before. And so that's how we reinforce the values, is we basically just bring them up a lot and talk about them a lot and not just write them on the wall and forget about them and not talk about them. So I love, Jonathan, that you're another, because I talk to a lot of businesses and how do you get everybody, we're moving in the right direction. And the first thing I always ask them is, what's your vision or mission statement, vision, values?
Yeah.
And they're like, what's like this or kind of like that? And I'm like, you don't even know your own vision statement. If you don't know your own vision statement, how do you expect anybody to have any idea which direction you're going in?
How can your employees go out and give their own elevator pitch when someone asks, what do they do? We practice our 30-second elevator pitch all the time for each agent just to make sure they have their own thing locked down. And I think it's interesting. You're very similar in terms of core values to us. Like our core values are lined up and none of them have anything to do with say. They're more about family, integrity, honesty, fairness. And I think that's what breeds the company culture. We're really in like a team building mode. We're going to get to the investing, but I don't think that you can be successful long-term in the investing. Even if you're just like a one-off investor, you're still building a team of contractors and subcontractors. And that's way harder. So you have to be even more forward. Maybe it's harder to keep your core values to your contractors on a one-off flip. But if you don't have people who align with your values, it can throw the whole project out of whack really quickly. So as you started to do flips, and then where and how did you decide that you'd be able to get other people's money? Because I think that's what a lot of people struggle with. How do you get from the level where you're playing with your own stuff and it's okay to be okay asking other people for money that like aren't your family?
Yeah, limited excuses. So first of all, I'll say that I don't come from money. I don't have a Wall Street background. All the vernacular that I know about investing has come from podcasts like yours and webinars and going to conferences and seminars post-university. So if you don't have that background, that's not an excuse. You don't need some big private equity background, but you do need an appetite to learn and grow. And so I would say that for me, when you raise money, you might think that it's all about trying to get your project done, but really it's about including others in your success.
That's great.
And I think if you have that mindset, everything will fall into place. Also, I think what's really important is raising money is not for everybody. I would probably say that if I lost $50,000, I would be less worried about it than if I lost somebody else $50,000. I would be up more. I'd be stressing more. And I actually really like raising money for other people because it makes me work harder. Because that's how I'm wired, is when money comes in, it's okay, I got to take care of this. Like I have people who invest with me who I've known since kindergarten, people that I've gone to school with, people that I know are relying on income from us that could be a major part of their retirement. So that to me is motivation. I just want to see how good we can be because I'm serving other people. Not that I don't care about my own money, but when it's other people and so I think if you can carry a high degree of responsibility, it might be a good fit for you to raise capital. But the story that I love to tell was on that first flip, we had a lot of friends in that neighborhood, like literally on that block. And one night we had everybody over for a card game, dinner and a card game. It was a bunch of millennials coming over. And I was sitting there and I was thinking, man, there's this new project coming up down the street that we really want to buy, but how are we going to get the money to do that? Because all my money had been put out on other deals, but this was a really good project. And I was looking around the room and I was thinking, I bet every single person in this room has 50 grand and everybody trusts each other here. And everybody knows that house down the street and knows the potential. And so that's how we raised money. We just started with people like that knew real estate, knew the location, and knew us. So I think that's the trifecta. They've got to know real estate. They don't have to. This is just like the three-pronged. If you hit these three check boxes, they're highly likely to invest.
Yeah.
Know real estate, know the market that you're investing in, and then know and trust you. And I think what put a cherry on top was we had a strategic plan built so we could actually show them, while we didn't have a lot of experience at the time, we had a vision of where we were going as a company. And so they were like, oh, okay, this isn't just like selling a Melaleuca or something like a Mary Kay random endeavor. This is very serious. They have a vision to build something. So I think that really helped a lot. So
yeah, I think from what you said, I've always thought to be able to be good at raising money, you have to have a confidence in yourself and in what you're bringing. And you have to think like you think. I don't want to lose someone else's money. And I always thought if I had partnerships and something went wrong, I could cover it with my own money. I was never going to let them lose the money. And I think you can tell pretty much right away who has that mindset and who doesn't. And I was wondering this because when you started to say how you first had it presented, everybody it was you knew, but as you grow, you have to actually develop that into marketing materials. And that's what I think is interesting. So like now as investors, when we're looking at deals or somebody comes to Spartan, you're going to have a very detailed marketing presentation that can take someone who you didn't know and boil down into the same feelings that you had in that room. I think that's like not the trick, but that's the success measure of how can you get people to engage and get that trust factor without having the background and at the card game. How do you get the card game in the marketing material?
No, it's totally true. And I think presenting and branding is the key to that. And having a portfolio of projects or referrals on a website or a track record that you can share, all those things are super important. But also resting on your mission, vision, values, even still, will be reflective in how you can represent how you're going to take care of your investors. In other words, how often am I going to be communicated to? We naturally started with monthly communications. Nobody told us to do that. That wasn't like a good practice. It was just, well, I was investing in this. That's what I would want. And we just put it into our operating agreement for all of our investments, monthly communications on the first. Once we started to get our bookkeeping really squared away, we started grabbing more financial reporting, occupancy data. Like as soon as we could figure something out or have some repetition, we just let's continue sharing more information to our investors. And so I think over time, people are like, would use our communication as examples as what the standard should be. And it was really just us being transparent. And I think that breeds referrals and then people have success. And so the snowball starts rolling down the hill pretty fast. So,
yeah, especially with incoming money, you said it breeds referrals. And I think the best way to breed referrals is exactly to say, you just do a good job. I don't need to go out and ask for referrals. People are just going to give them because I'm just busy doing my job. And that is relaying the data and being more transparent, especially as you scale it. Let's get into self-storage a little because I know I really wanted to talk. You guys have so much experience in self-storage. How did you first get in? And then we'll talk about what the metrics you're looking for and what you buy, because I think even people who are brand new investors, they should think about self-storage in ways that we're going to explain because there's some real pluses to it that are much easier than your multifamily down the street.
Yeah, I'd like to get three things out of the way that set the tone. People don't use self-storage because they have too much stuff. People use self-storage because of life events. Great example, I was flying an airplane down to Florida right when the pandemic hit. And one passenger, 180-seat airplane, and I had to go up to the passenger and say, hey, why are you going to Florida? And she said, my mother just passed away and I'm traveling down there to put all of her stuff into self-storage. Life events don't stop happening. And the more that we have, the more people are going to use self-storage. So I think people think, oh, Gen Z and millennials they're getting rid of stuff and they're doing more experiences and things like that. But those are our biggest customers. And they are the ones that have the most moving around in life events. I think that's a big misconception. And I think during COVID, we saw that where there was lots of disruption globally in the United States. And then some people think, okay, that's nice, Ryan, but why isn't it as prevalent like in Europe and other countries? And I think self-storage just started here in the United States as a land banking play in Texas, and it just spread. And so now people know that it's a tool and a resource that they have on every street corner. So if you are moving, I'll get a storage unit. Or if you know that you're getting downsized, or if you're moving or something that I'm just going to get a storage unit, right? Or I can't put my utility truck for work in my driveway anymore because of a covenant restriction. I'm going to get a storage unit or get some parking. So I think it's become really relevant in society in America, and it just hasn't really spread to other countries. But I think if it did, I think it would really take off. And also, I think that I know that there's more self-storage now than there are fast food restaurants. So if you go to a small town you'll notice more self-storage facilities there than you will dining establishments or like McDonald's or Burger King or Starbucks. So it is very commonplace now for that.
Yeah, and they're, like you said, they're so multifunctional. I know you're going to get to your other 2 points, but like you said, it's not just for storing one thing. There's options for businesses and other things, collectibles, anything that you can do to go. All right, keep going with your 3 because that first one was great.
Yeah. Second one is I feel like they're just being built all over the place. I feel like there's one popping up in my neighborhood every other week, and I see them everywhere now. And you probably do because, again, more of them than you do see fast food restaurants. Here's the thing, though. There has been more self-storage built in the last decade than there has its 40-year history, just in the last 10 years. However, during that same time, occupancy averages have gone up 10%. So not only did all of that new supply come onto the market, but it was all absorbed, which
means there's still need for more.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's incredible how the asset has performed. And so I think that's why you see now a lot of lenders are starting to lend on it. Investors are starting to hear about it. It's becoming more of a main food group of commercial real estate, where it was kind of like this like random small thing that people did or whatever.
I wonder, before you get to the third one, I wonder if it's just like, I mean, America's more like of a maximalist society than European countries. Just people have a lot of stuff. But like you said, you can get caught with a lot of stuff in a time frame where you don't have any other options. You need this stuff. It's like all of us parents with like our kids' stuff. I don't want to throw away like 20 macaroni drawings, but I want to keep them. So you're going to keep them somewhere. And especially if people are getting older, they're going to downsize. They're going to want to keep some stuff. The kids don't want it. There's so many different options. Yeah. All right. Let's get number 3.
Number 3, it's not just like Storage Wars.
Yeah, that doesn't even make any money. I've talked to all my friends. The auctions make like none of the money.
Yeah, you literally can't make money. It's impossible. Yeah. But it's an interesting point, and it's worth talking about. It's not like Storage Wars. There isn't somebody on somebody's shoulder trying to wonder or guess what's in the unit. Everything's done online. So all of our facilities use a company called Late to Lean, and it's a third-party service. And so whenever we have a customer who's usually 30 to 45 days delinquent, we go through the lien process. We outsource this, and they get letters in the mail. They make postings on the local papers because we have collateral against all of their belongings. And so if you don't pay for a storage unit for 30 or 45 days, whatever, depending on the state, you can file a lien against those belongings and then auction them off. And most states are open door states, meaning that you can show the person online who's bidding on your stuff exactly what they're getting. There's no ambiguity. There's not like a guy that comes to the property and auctions it off. But it is fun watching that show and wondering what's inside. But
it certainly didn't hurt the self-storage industry for people wanting to buy self-storage. Collectors are like, I'll get like a little self-storage in like Wichita. Who knows what I could get?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, if you want to go see what auctions are open right now in your local market, you can go to selfstorageauctions.net. And you can type in your zip code and you can literally see all the things coming to auction. And usually the first like Thursday or so of the month is when you're going to see things come up for bid. And please bid on it because usually we lose money on auctions. Please go in there and buy stuff.
For the storage unit operator, it's getting a bay free to get someone in who's going to pay. You're just trying to get the stuff out and do it the right way.
You nailed it. Yeah. And we can only recoup the costs, the expenses, or the revenue that we didn't get from that tenant. So if we open the door and there's a Harley Davidson there and it's worth $50,000 or something, and the tenant only owes us $10,000, we get the $10,000 plus some legal costs that we paid, which are nominal.
And the tenant gets the rest.
Exactly.
That's pretty fair.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's great is I think it's worth elaborating a little bit on this, which is I think it's the most powerful thing in commercial real estate, having the ability to lien your tenant's belongings or lock the unit after so many days delinquent.
Number 2. So, I mean, the things that I say, and I want to get your opinion on this because you have so much more experience than me. When it comes to self-storage, the things that I focus on are no tenants in terms of no one's living there. Usually no more than one bathroom. So water is limited other than sprinkler systems. And 3, if someone doesn't pay, you just change their code and they can't access their stuff and they can't do any damage. And then 4, self-storage is ridiculously cheap to build.
Yeah.
So not building these there are really nice storage facilities, but generally these are industrial products with industrial things that are being built. Your cost to build is not that much. It's why so many people can build new. And they're definitely like, there's really nice ones and really like bad ones, but the bad ones probably make just as much money per square foot.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Are there any in those four, or what else is there that was the linchpin for you guys saying, look, this is just easier than dealing with tenants in multifamilies, 100-unit apartment building versus 100 storage units? Give me a break. It's
aligned with our mission statement, right? You're providing a service during a time of disruption, but also you never will have to evict somebody from their place of home. Right. So
and feel bad.
And we just didn't really want it. We just didn't want to be in that game necessarily. So we like that. Easy to own, easy to evict, easy to maintain. Those are the 3 E's that we liked.
And also though, easy to turn back on. If you start going through an eviction or you kick someone out, you can't just put them back in because it's already messed up. They can just pay and you can just activate their code again. You don't even have to deal with them face to face. Hey, your code's activated. You just got an email. Because you were saying you don't have to have that face to face with all. You can have 100 clients, never talk to them. But like
Absolutely.
Growing up, I learned from my dad. We were evicting people like nicely, but we had to evict them. And I remember this. I've told this story before, but you'll think it's funny because we're just in that mode. We were evicting someone who happened to be old, and he like was laying down in front of the car, and I was like 18 maybe. And I'm like, Dad, I don't know what to do. He's like, well, we had already padlocked the house. The sheriffs were there. Like we literally had given them over a year to move. So like we didn't feel bad, but I had never gotten that like empathetic approach. And my dad was like so nice, but like at some point he's losing money. So he's like, well, just drive around him. I'm like, what? Like he's laying on the ground. He's just drive around him in the grass. I just drove around him in the grass. And that's tenants for you though.
Yeah. And to your point, it's a pretty highly automated business. It's not completely automated though. I think that's like a funny thing about the industry is people are like, oh, it's you don't even have to have people. No, you still have to have people. You can make it so your revenue software talks to the gate. So like when you don't pay after a few days, your gate automatically, it just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
But you still need someone to sweep out units, turn over things. Some people still prefer to have a manager on site. There's a lot of things that kind of go with it. It's a retail business, right? So you're doing things, you're thinking about this business as who lives around my property? What is their incomes? How close are they? How many are there? How many competing self-storage businesses are in that hyper-local market? And so I think that's another thing to really take away is it's not like people are going to drive an hour to go to your storage facility because it has a better school system. You have to really think of it as, do I have the populace around the site and the demand to have a successful business plan? And I think that's probably the most important thing about the business.
Yeah. When you're vetting new opportunities or for new places to build, the traffic pattern is really like number one on how many cars are going by a day is like your first metric, and then population growth.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
And so in terms of like you now have 11 different states. When you're choosing an opportunity zone, are you building or are you just buying existing facilities from
both?
Variety?
We build around about 500,000 square feet a year of new stuff, and we will buy existing facilities. Most of what we purchase, though, 95% of what we purchase already exists. Maybe once a year, we'll do one where it's like a complete ground up development where we're buying an infill lot or some kind of a ground up construction where there's no business that exists on site, but mostly just buying existing.
Yeah. So, what are your metrics when you're looking for, when you're on the hunt for new facilities, which you are all the time? Are you looking for metro areas with growth, or are you looking for just an opportunity that comes across?
So
where numbers work.
Yeah. So I would say we look for 10 things. So number one, we're in secondary and tertiary markets. And I know tertiary means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I'll define that a little bit. We want self-storage facilities that are within 30 minutes of major population centers. Something 30 or 40 minutes south of Seattle, where there's a major population center, economic drivers, multiple modes of employment, et cetera. So say tertiary market, number one. Number two, access to big population density. Number three, we want to have multiple places of employment that are driving the economy. Number 4, we look for high trafficked facilities. We like to see 10 to maybe even 20,000 drive-by cars a day because that's where most of your tenants are going to come from, or from visibility from the main road. Oh yeah, I know that place. It's right down the street from my house. Number 5, we like to find markets where everybody is highly occupied. We go and mystery shop, and there's a bunch of mom and pops that are highly occupied properties that generally have rents that are higher than the subject property that we're either about to build or buy. I guess about to buy in that case. And then the 6th thing that we like to see is
can I stop you after 5 though, before you get to 6?
Yeah.
On the mystery shop though, I think it's interesting to do that for self-storage, people who are interested in the acquisition. That's basically just calling all the local storage to see if you can get a unit, or trying to click one online to see if it works. That's a really great tip that I don't think a lot of people think about. And I actually translate that to Airbnbs also all the time, because if you want to know the market is, look at the occupancy of the ones that are there. And you're doing exactly that. You're saying, look, if everybody's at 90% storage, this market needs more storage. I mean, it seems obvious, but without the due diligence, I think that was a really important point. I just wanted to get that. All right, number 6.
Number 6, we usually like to see expansion opportunities. So the ability to, it comes with a half acre, an acre, or 2 acres of expansion potential, so that we can potentially add on additional units if we have more demand. We really like that. Maybe a 7. I'll include a couple in this. So demographics, we want to see income growth and population growth. The holy grail is 2% annual growth in a market, but if it's 0.75% to 1.5%, that's usually pretty good. And we like to see income growth of nearly 1%. So that's a big thing. And then medium household income, we love to see at least $100,000 medium household income. Sometimes it's less than that, but usually what we like to benchmark off household income is like 2.5% to 3.5% of that income can actually be used and dedicated towards self-storage. And so maybe the 8th thing, I'll deviate a little bit to ground up development.
Yeah.
We want to see at least $15 per square foot annual rents if we're going to do ground up development, because the numbers don't work otherwise. Really, at the end of the day, I can go into that and we can talk a long time about the math behind that. But generally, if you're not getting $15 per square foot, don't bother building.
Yeah.
Just go look somewhere else. So that's a way to kill projects really fast, is somebody's like, hey, I got this really great ground up site. We'll look at the market rents and they're at $9 or $10. Probably not going to work. One of the last things, the 9th or 10th thing that we like, is we want to see unmet demand. And so what we do, and I don't want to confuse a little bit too much on this, but we look at what the square foot utilization is per person in that given hyper-local market. Mm-hmm. And then we look at what the population is, and then we benchmark against that around surrounding cities. So let's just say pick a city, we'll look at the surrounding cities and see what their saturation rate is per square foot. And let's just say all the surrounding cities are like 10 square foot and ours is 3. That just means that there isn't enough supply to capture the demand. And so we can come up with a little bit of a phooey number on what the over-under is on how much demand still exists. So we like to see surplus excess demand, in other words. And then the last thing I think is probably the most important for your business thesis is the opportunity to raise rents, and not market rate rent growth, but literally like-kind property that is below, that you're buying, the subject property you're buying is below what the competitors are charging, because at the end of the day, that's where you can go and you can write your pro forma to that and understand what value you can give to a property without really adding a lot of CapEx to it. So really good.
Those were great. I want to hit the last one and then number 6, but the last one's so important. That's the one thing I left out of my aha on self-storage is how many times a year do you raise the rates? Because that's where I always get burned. And I always tell this to people, no one is going to move from a one storage unit to another for $10 a month. And when you charge everybody an upgrade of $10 a month and nobody leaves, you just made a lot of money, because it's correct. It's $10 a month. You're not going to move your whole thing. It's annoying. So storage is like an unending, when I look at how much I'm paying, I have art storage for a lot of art, and I look at it and every time it goes up, do I want to go get the stuff? And I'm probably up $60 from when I started. It's crazy.
Let's hope they're not listening into this podcast.
Yeah. But that's such a huge thing. How often can you raise the rents in most markets, or how often do you guys do that?
Legally, you can raise the rents every 30 days.
Yeah, that's
So
what I thought. It's unbelievable.
it's an inflation hedge, right? Because if inflation's going up on a multifamily deal or a single family or even like a triple net tenant lease, you might be stuck holding that rate for 20 years on storage. It doesn't matter. You can literally follow the CPI, and that's what makes it a great inflation hedge. But the way that we do our rental increases is we like a little bit of a shock to the system. And there was a property we raised rents on average 90%. Because they were just so far below and there was just so much demand in the market. I don't think we have like a scientific frequency in which we would raise the rents, but we like to aggressively get to market, kind of look around kind of poke our heads up, look around for error, come up for air on, okay, well, how's our occupancy doing? How's the competitors doing? And then maybe even go a little bit above the market if we can do it. And that's really that's the best property, right? When you have above market rent. So I think one thing to take away if you're thinking about storage is occupancy matters, like physical, like a lot of my investors invest in multifamily and self-storage, and they do self-storage as a diversification strategy. They get heavy into multifamily and then they just want to do something else. And multifamily, like occupancy is a big deal. Like physical occupancy is a huge thing because it's kind of a bigger ship with a smaller rudder. We are a fast boat with a big rudder because we can change our pricing. We can change our tenant leases really fast. We can do flash marketing sales. We can get people in. And so we care about physical occupancy, but it's not the most important metric by a long shot. And we really care about rent collections. And that's where we really look to success. A great example is we had a facility that was 95% full when we purchased it. And we've increased collections like 40% in less than 6 months. But someone might look at our occupancy and think that we're not doing our jobs because it's at 75% right now. But we've increased our collections substantially in a very short period of time. And so now we're just going to backfill those vacant units and keep increasing collections. So that's really what's the most important driver is what are you doing to your rent growth and your bottom line? Yeah.
Yeah. And I assume that technology has so much enhanced the collection portal because now you can just pull from ACH or a credit card and like people could just move away and forget their storage unit and still charging them for 2 years and their stuff's fine. That's like the classic thing. They have my card. I know it goes up, but I don't want to move this stuff because that's why it's in storage. I don't know. I just have to move it to another facility. That's annoying.
Yeah. We're a cashless, checkless business now. So
yeah, it's perfect.
We've actually, since 2016, have never accepted cash. And I believe a couple of years ago, we've eliminated checks.
Yeah, I mean,
which is unpopular.
Makes it easier. Yeah, but no returns. This is the way it is.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of when we purchase a facility, the owner will say, you're not going to allow them to pay cash. Oh my God, you're not going to have Johnny and Susie and Sally and all these people are going to... And every time it works out.
Yeah, they'll figure it out or they won't. You'll just get somebody else. I wanted to hit back on number 6, which is the value add, because this is what I think you've talked about how much calculations you do. So when you're calculating on a self-storage, you're usually working with a modified cap rate and figuring out what they've left out. But the interesting thing is, like you said, when there's extra land, that's not going in the cap rate. So even if you have, say, a 6 cap, which is not that appealing for self-storage, but then you have an extra 2 acres that you can build on, that's not going to be included in the cap. And I bet that's exactly what you mean when you're looking at it. Like you're like, oh, we can put in 40 more units. So we're going to go way up. And that's why I wanted to just get into that a little more, because that's the real extra value add where you can make a lot of money long term is more opportunities on this space that were unused by the prior owner.
It's also worth noting that there's tax benefits to it because once you build and deliver those units, you get additional bonus depreciation and cost segregation. That was a surprise to me a couple of years ago. Yeah. We started entering a lot of these expansions that we put in the works like 4 or 5 years ago into service, and you get bonus depreciation from that. So it was a little sprinkled in added benefit when those units came back online. So it was nice to have the property really starting to roar with cash flow and then having the tax shield just kind of drop in at the same time. So it's really nice.
Are you seeing the pandemic knocked out just a lot of commercial retailers? Are you seeing a lot of those buildings and areas being turned into self-storage because it's such an opportunity business?
I think that's a trend that's been going on over the past decade. We actually purchased a Macy's that was converted into self-storage.
That's what I was thinking. Macy's, Toys R Us, Sears. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I wouldn't say that the pandemic has really sped up or enhance that. But I would say that it's been a trend, and there's more boxes going dark, or however they phrase it, where people are moving out. I think part of the issue there is some of those buildings are just really overpriced because they're carrying like retail tenant price per square foot, et cetera. And
but no one wants to buy it for that. So it doesn't make any sense anymore. It has to be changed into something else.
And I've noticed a lot of times too, you're almost better off just demoing the building anyway, because you got this massive parking lot that you have absolutely no use for. And so you can really repurpose it into something a little bit more usable. So
that's another great point. I've looked at ones with the extra parking, and we're like, this is just more units, because people remember, of course, for people who don't know much about self-storage, no one's staying there. Right. Cars pull in and cars pull out. You don't need that many parking spaces. You maybe need 5 parking spaces like per 100 units. Is that a fair estimate, or am I off on that?
No, actually, I would say less than that. So we have an 800 unit that has 1 toilet, and it has 9 spots, but that's also because there's 1,500 square feet of retail there. So I would probably say 3 or 4. I mean, because think about it. It depends on how it's laid out too, right? Because if you have to drive around to the back to building 4 or 5 or whatever, right? Like you're not going to the front office and then walking over to your unit. You're going to just drive up to your unit. So you really don't need a lot of parking at all. Yeah.
This has been fantastic. We've gone so long. I don't want to hold you. So I'm gonna move past most of our questions, but I want to get to one really important question, because you have such a good background. And I think we just exposed a lot of people who maybe don't know a ton about self-storage to an opportunity. So before I get to how people contact you, if you could give, because you did start with flipping houses, so you've been from the beginning to this point, if you could give new investors in this market, like the kind of current climate, one piece of advice, what would that be? This podcast was created to promote like a more mindful approach to real estate investing. And what you've said with your core values and how you scaled is right in line with that. What would you tell a new investor or a novice investor right now, like how to approach real estate investing and not get overwhelmed? Because it's hard.
Specifically on being overwhelmed, I would say come up with what your investment thesis is and practice sticking to it, because your investment thesis is what you are going to buy and what you are going to do, but it's actually helping you to say no, because it's mostly a tool to get you to not do things that are not in line with your investment thesis. So, I think in the beginning, I always say, learn as much as you can and learn all the asset classes and go far and wide and see everything that's out there. And then once you do that, what's your investment thesis? And then focus. And like I told you today, $15 a square foot for ground up construction, that's a very easy number. You don't have to do a lot of math to know if it's a deal or not. And once you narrow your scope, it's so easy to scale because you know exactly what you want. And then it's okay to reevaluate your investment thesis on a semi-annual or every few years and go, does this still work? But stick to it for a while, and because you'll learn so much from just focus. And I think that's wildly important.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I love the idea of learning about the classes. So you have an idea of what asset classes are out there. But this paralysis is so high in real estate investing, and it happens for just what you're giving the advice not to do. It's you try to focus. I want some self-storage, and I like a diversified portfolio. Like I really do long term. But I think if you're trying to do it all to start, you're never going to be able to decide which one's better because the calculations are different for all of those. So like, how much can you possibly be doing vetting wise on that? You'll never sleep.
Exactly. And there's so much. I think what's great is so many experts out there willing to share the conferences, meetups, podcasts, great places to just learn what the heuristics are for your specific niche and know what makes sense so that you can become an expert in it. Yeah.
This was amazing. The best place to find you guys is Spartan-investors.com, correct?
Yep, that's our website.
And then if someone wants to reach out to you directly, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Just Ryan, R-Y-A-N, at Spartan-investors.com.
Yeah, I should always say hyphen. If I say dash, they might use an underscore.
Oh, yeah.
You must have learned
I know, we
that
gotta
along
drop
the
that
way.
hyphen. We got to drop that hyphen. We got to pay the $5,000 or whatever that.
Say, I know.
Somebody's soliciting me to just sell the domain name right now. So
I know. Yeah, it's always like that. I really appreciate this. Has been absolutely fantastic. I actually learned a ton. I'm going to contact you on the side because I really like mission statements, and I feel like you are obviously a strong business. I've looked through the website, but when you look at it and you can maintain your core values and then push that out to your investors, I think that's what a lot of investors who are trying to figure out how to scale want to do. And you gave them great advice on how to get money into the game as well. So it was great to have you, and I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, Ryan. Have a great day. This has been episode 24 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Ryan Gibson of Spartan Investment Group. We'll see you next week. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with me, Jonathan Green, and I just want to remind you, and this is always an uncomfortable part, I don't want you to think that I'm begging for you to like, subscribe, follow, do whatever you have to do for the podcast, leave a 5-star review. But if you like the podcast and you think it adds value in the real estate investing sphere, then just do me a personal favor. Like the podcast, follow it, share it when you can with your friends, and be so kind as to write a 5-star review if you believe it deserves a 5-star review up against what else is out there. I would really appreciate it, and I hope you keep listening.